Can the New York Knicks head coach Mike Brown continue to produce lineups in the lab? And will those changes deliver continued results? We will look at that on this edition of From the Bench, a Knicks podcast. Hi, I'm Mike Spendley, your host of From the Bench, a Knicks podcast. I'm an ex-New York Knicks ball boy who sat on the bench for 2 years in 1972 and 1973, both years in the NBA Finals. And that second year resulted in the New York Knicks' last NBA championship. I'm also a voiceover talent and a sports director at a local radio station. I know what it takes to win an NBA title. I watched the Knicks practice in those days, and I watched them close up and personal at the games as well. I watched that front office build a team, actually one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. Today's episode of From the Bench is not a half-season report card on head coach Mike Brown, but we will discuss his ways and the imagination he uses with his lineup like a mad scientist does in the laboratory. Knicks come back from way back on Christmas Day to defeat Cleveland 128-126. In fact, with 10:50 remaining on Christmas Day, the Knicks are trailing the Cavaliers by 17 points, and they come back and win. However, the Christmas gift that the Knicks players and their mad scientists presented us yesterday merits some discussion on Mike Brown's excellent work to this point, 31 games out of 83. Yes, 83, because the NBA Cup Final is an extra game on the schedule, and as you know, those stats do not count. Either way, each game in this season, it appears that the mad scientist Mike Brown comes up with yet another lineup and another way to win games even when the Knicks are shorthanded. Before we discuss the work of the mad scientist, and believe me when I tell you I use that term with the utmost reverence, this was a very unique situation that Mike Brown came into. The New York Knicks have achieved some success in the previous few years. He walked into an extremely competitive base team that had an emerging superstar, by the way, who has a healthy ego, not one big enough not to welcome and embrace a new system. So the star bought into the system and made sure that everyone on this Knicks team did as well. He was helped by Josh Hart, Bridges, and OG also. They're working with Towns to buy in 100%, and I think that's a process, as we have seen. You know, I can't help but think of the process of hiring Mike Brown. Leon Rose thought the first thing he needed was a strong communicator. That box was checked for Brown right from the start. He needed a teacher, and that box was checked well in the first 31 games. But maybe the most important checkpoint he had to feel comfortable with was a bigger rotation. And as we said, that box can also be checked off from the list as well. I'm not here to criticize or bash Tom Thibodeau, but he had some stubborn streaks. I respected a lot of those. But insistence on not playing young players in the end helped quicken his departure. And that's becoming more obvious day by day. Remember, Ian Begley from SNY in an earlier report a month and a half ago stated that Leon Rose almost pulled the trigger on letting Tibbs go twice before. So it's my opinion that Rose in the front office knew it was time for a change. And believe me when I tell you, there is no perfect coach for a team on paper. You have to come in and be trusted. And it's my belief he is trusted by his players. He called his team leaders and set up meetings with them. He wanted to know what made them tick. He wanted to know about their families before he had any basketball decision. The Abu Dhabi experience was a good one for beginning team morale. They came home and they start 2-0 at Madison Square Garden. And then they lose their first 3 road games, get embarrassed in the third loss by the Bulls. I think a lot of people were thinking at 2-3, what's going on? Obviously not enough games to show they bought in. Brown came here and established his relationship with the leaders. Key. Remember a while back when we had Kelly Tripucka on, the former Detroit Piston All-Star, and he talked about Hall of Fame coach Chuck Daly going right to Isaiah Thomas and how Isaiah bought in. Check that episode out. It was episode 3 in our playlist. A lot of interesting comparisons by Tripucka. And remember, the Pistons were a young team as well, but after a few years, they turned that into 2 championships in Detroit. I've always been an analyst that thought that injuries can help galvanize a team, especially if they are not season-ending injuries, in this case with the Knicks. Landry Shamet and Deuce McBride go down. Jordan Clarkson steps up. But the real key here is the two injuries is the emergence of Tyler Kolek. And wow, has he come into his own. Part necessity and a big part hard work. Brown trusted him a little bit and has coached him well. It is ongoing. As a crazy Knicks fan, I love to see Brown take a player out, especially a young player, to give him a 1-minute coaching session before he even sits down on the bench, and then puts him right back in the ballgame. You don't see that a lot in professional sports these days. Kolek has trusted Brown, and vice versa. Kolek has been shooting the three-pointer better and working much harder on his defense. But Kolek's early performance against the Timberwolves the other night before Christmas at halftime, he was only 3 for 10 shooting, and had Coach Mike Brown say to him after a few missed threes, and I quote Brown's words from the New York Post, "You've taken 10 shots, the second most on the team, and you've made only 3. And 3 of those shots were air balls. If you were going to take that many shots, you got to make some, kid." So Kolek goes out and goes 6 for 12 in the second half. Later in that game, as he walked to the bench, he looks at Brown and says, "I made shots." Brown respected a somewhat cocky answer because that is what Brown was looking for. The mad scientist not only helped Kolek excel, but also helped him increase his confidence in a major, big way. Then Kolek goes out on Christmas Day and basically crushes Cleveland, hitting some huge threes in the Knicks' big Christmas Day comeback. Another formula created by the mad scientist. But in reality, Brown seems like a father out there watching his kids. Make no mistake, he demands the players do what he asks, and he addresses that behind the scenes. You know, my coach Red Holzman had the ability to do the same. He demanded that you give 100% on defense or you were not going to play. In fact, when the Knicks won their first 1970 championship, little-used guard Mike Reardon worked so hard on defense in practice, Holzman started to bring him in to use him to give a foul instead of getting a foul called on a starter. And that launched him into a bigger role. Brown's not afraid to admit his mistakes, and he's made a few. He didn't make any yesterday either. And with 7:43 remaining and the Knicks down by 12, he substituted offense for defense and rebounding and replaced Karl Anthony Towns, an offensive threat, with Mitchell Robinson. And Mitchell was a force off the offensive glass, leading to second shots and more running off the defensive glass. He found a way to help win it. He gives his players all the credit, and he constantly reveals how his assistant coaches give him the ideas that help this team win. A selfless coach, he always shifts accolades from himself to the players and then back to his assistant coaches. All I can say with this, in all sincerity and all confidence, is that head coach Mike Brown, also known as the mad scientist, is handling a difficult situation in a most positive way. In fact, I can only imagine he's in the lab right now with his assistants, figuring out how to play the Atlanta Hawks their next game, the first of 3 road games in Atlanta tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Thank you for listening, and I've enjoyed bringing you this episode of From the Bench. And if you've liked the episode, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button in the lower right portion of your screen and help this channel grow. And also, please leave us an email at michaelspendley.com. We'll give you information on our VIP club in the huddle. We're going to do some really cool things as the second half of the season approaches. We're going to do some live broadcasts leading up into the playoffs. We'll have some interviews with some Hall of Fame ex-Knick players and a lot of other things, merchandise, discounted, those sort of things. So keep it in mind, and please send us that email to michaelspendley.com, and we'll take care of the rest and get you information out on In the Huddle. And if you like the way that I sound and you like a voiceover talent to bring some life to your project, you can also leave me a message at michaelspendley.com. I'd love to do an audition for you and give you every chance to help you with your project from the audio point of view and work with you and your audio. Once again, thank you for listening to this episode of From the Bench, a Knicks podcast. And stay focused.